So we know the score. We're going to go round because that's what we do. And I need time to think because I wasn't expecting this. So yeah, you can tell us what you're currently working on. Because I want to know anyway. So we go round.
What am I working on at the moment? I'm still working through libraries, very much at the beginning. The difference between whole numbers and infinitesimal numbers, which I don't forget, but I found very attractive last week. And I don't know if it has any relationship with this what we're looking at. Probably, but just partially. Mark wrote me an email about it last week, which I'm still trying to understand. So we're looking at the three infinitesimal numbers.
Who was Leibniz?
Who was Leibniz? Leibniz was, I like to think of him as a Baroque philosopher from late 17th, early 18th century German. Often put in a lot of the rationalists, but not entirely. The anti-essentialists, maybe. He invented calculus. I was in a dispute with Newton because one invented it later but published it earlier, and the other one invented it earlier but didn't publish it. And he's famous for the concept of this word is the best of the possible words, which is not the sounds like. That is a logical consequence of how things come together in a specific way, which is what I'm trying to understand at the moment. That's why I cannot do it.
What's his name, sorry?
Leibniz.
Gottfried. I think that's how you pronounce it. Gottfried Leibniz.
The goalkeeper in Monty Python philosopher.
So he's a 17th century philosopher. As Matthew said, he invented calculus, which is...
There's a book on it just on the desk.
Without making it too simple, he is part of this modern discussion about the property of things. Is the property of things only in things or partially in us? So it's the debate between empiricism and rationalism, which can never be divided clearly with a group of some philosopher on one side and some philosopher on the other. But what I find very interesting is, if I understand it properly, is that his introduction of infinitesimal numbers changes entirely the notion of zero or of difference in this case. So something that one approximates infinitesimally, but is never precise, pointed, and sharp. That's what I find quite interesting at the moment. Trying to use it for my definition or construction of sense.
Now, he's a very great philosopher. I mean, people like Bertrand Russell on the analytic side sort of come out of people like Leibniz. And really, he spent most of his life in the library, working in the libraries of some German principality. He was very friendly with Sophie, the Duchess of the time, who gives us George I. There's all link up in the Baroque age of all these guys, because Leibniz knows Spinoza, and Spinoza knows Descartes. They all know each other in this kind of landscape of the 17th century, which we were talking about the other day, where you have these people who are kind of linked in this place in Amsterdam in the 17th century, because it's the most advanced city of its time. It's got street lights, it's got paving stones, and it's got a kind of open and free attitude, when the rest of Europe, you can imagine, is all ruled by despotic kings or authoritarian regimes and stuff. So you've got Amsterdam at that time. It's full of all these outsiders who are on the run from their own kind of regimes, which is why you've got Descartes living there, famous, I think therefore I am. You've got Leibniz, you've got Spinoza, he's there as well. And they all kind of know each other, they're all kind of related in their kind of arguments and stuff about.
They write each other as well, long letters.
Yeah, and they're, so it's an interesting period in history, I find, anyway, because of just all these different ways that they're linked up. And I mean, just for example, Descartes, it was famously put on the spot by Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, who is the daughter of the Winter, what they know as the Winter Queen, another Elizabeth of Bohemia, who's the daughter of James the James the First, Knight of Scotland, so the brother of James, Charles II. So she's the one that asked Descartes all these difficult questions about the mind-body split and how does it join up. You know, the idea that there's a body and a mind that somehow don't meet. So she asks all these really difficult questions, which she gets a place in the philosophy textbooks for asking these questions. She was known as the Greek, because she asked lots of. She's one of the missing figures from philosophy, maybe one of these kind of extraordinary women who are in the background, like maybe like Hegel's sister, you know, asks lots of difficult questions, but doesn't make it into the philosophy books. There's all these kind of lost characters. So in this time, there's another one is Queen Christiana of Sweden, who eventually asked Descartes to go and teach her philosophy. So off he goes, but Descartes used to get up in the midday, and he goes to Sweden, and he has to get up at 5 in the morning, it's freezing cold, to teach her Queen Christiana philosophy, and catches pneumonia and dies. But again, she's another character. She's in that film that we were talking about. Did you want to hear the Greta Garbo film, Queen Christiana? It's all time. So she's another character who doesn't quite make it into the philosophy books, who's from this interesting time in the 17th century when they're all beginning to work out rationalist ideas and thinking. So this is just who Leibniz is. That's all that is. So one of his main ideas is that for somebody to be what they are, every attribute is necessary. So for Julius Caesar to be Julius Caesar, he has to cross the Rubicon. He has to do everything. Everything belongs to him in his kind of nature, which is against the essentialist argument, which says that only some essentialist features are necessary to be what. So just Julius Caesar could still be Julius Caesar if he hadn't crossed the Rubicon. But it's an interesting thought, because, I mean, you know, is your breakfast important? Do you think your breakfast is important? You don't think it makes a difference to you, but as an anti-essentialist, as it were, Leibniz would say that it's all necessary. Everything that you do, everything you're going to do is necessary for you. Probably these two arguments, I'm just sort of extrapolating on him for a moment. Probably these two arguments, you can't really think of them. I mean, if everything is necessary, or if only some things are necessary, well, it's very difficult for someone like me, let's say, to decide one way or the other, to jump either way. You know, is everything necessary? Well, I can't really go with that. I can't really decide what is necessary. I can't decide what is necessary either. So both arguments kind of become, in a Hegelian language, a kind of belonging together in the same, where you can't decide in a rational way which way to jump. Leibniz obviously jumps. He says, no, it's all necessary. How he can make that move, I don't know. I don't understand. You know, that is some move that he can make, and he can make that claim that everything that happens is necessary in some way. On the other side, I can't make the decision about what is essential or not. And of course, essentialist arguments are important in feminist philosophy, and also in the nature of things like when I think about my particular bugbear is, you know, being an artist or not an artist. Again, is that essential? What does my ideas about the image being image itself being enabling or disabling certain courses of action? So, for me to say I'm not an artist, how does that disable a course of action? Or how does that kind of image of self enable or disable a course of action? Anyway, I'm just stolen the argument here because all we were doing was about line here. So.
Well, actually, the line here is speaks about line. It's still
Oh, good. Anyway, that's line there.
I'll just quickly say, sorry, Johnny's going to be here at 2:15, so she's
All right.
started in a meeting.
So, let's hear a bit from Stuart.
This week, because I'm not doing a PhD, I can learn lots of different things, as we were discussing just now. Doing them maybe have a bit more freedom. But I'm trying to decide whether this is just a constant state of reverie or a lack of focus. I'm not really sure.
So you're going to the essential, my essential arguments. You know, is the essential?
Well, yes, yeah, it does
essential.
slot in, I think, to that. Probably relativism comes in somewhere there as well. I'm sort of accused of relativistic, or maybe accused, no, that's a bit strong, but there's a danger to that sort of things, which I had to Google and look up on Wikipedia.
One of my lecturers told me I was the most prevaricating person she'd ever met. Oh, Mark, won't you come to a decision, please?
Yeah, I think it's,
I'm not sure, you know, it's that kind of...
So it's the
Maybe.
reverie then, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the reverie, yeah. Okay. And then on a more specific level, I got interested in the asterisk because it was a nice, very short quote, Braver, just said, it says an asterisk, which I quite liked, because going back to that, you could just go on forever with it, couldn't you? And then I wanted to tweet #asterisk, but Twitter wouldn't let me. I don't know why, it thought I was trying to favourite something, so I had to put a space in. I thought that was interesting.
Sorry, it's probably asterisk means everything in the computer.
Yeah, so I was trying to hashtag.
So maybe they
Yeah.
It'd be interesting.
You brought something down.
So it's everything.
It's everything, yes. When you're looking for
Oh, there we go, that's so.
a word that starts with A, you
Yeah.
have to put A, asterisk, and all the A.
So I could have just said, like,
So
this
it means it remains open, or it's all of it?
All of it. Yeah,
All
it's
of it,
like
not anything, but all of it.
all of everything. It's
all
kind of
encompassing, isn't it?
yes.
It means it's just
everything
the
you
whole-
have there. Because
Everything
it
that's
has to
there.
be-
Okay, so
has-
it is open. It's not saying give me the entirety, the totality of it. It's everything.
Yes, it's always under a directory, as you can imagine. If you ask a computer, give me everything, the computer goes bananas. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's impossible. It's always something specific.
So I think that's good, and I think that works because I was also interested in tautology, and I think I was hoping that was what that was doing. And I think it.
And there's lots of tautology in
Exactly that, yeah.
It's not how it uses a lot of things.
So it's like a sort of a tautology turbine. I don't know. That's my week. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah, asterisk is fascinating.
I hadn't realised it had that power.
And it's the power of draw attention as well. You see an asterisk in the
Well, that's right. Yeah, I looked into the typographic side of it, and then was told off, sort of, in my looking up, that you can't have two asterisks. You then have a dagger, then you have a double dagger.
Yeah.
Rather than start one. I don't know what you do after a double dagger.
You know, in the there's a thesis where Daniel Rubenstein has just written about a comma.
Right.
Written
Oh,
about-
okay. No,
written about the comma in discourse figure, comma,
Ah.
figure, and he's written about the comma in it.
I think
which has a spatial.
when she introduced me to that book, said that was the most important part of it.
Yeah. No, I think mine is, but. Do you want to say something?
I couldn't do anything interesting this week, so I'll skip.
Dr. Taylor.
This week, this week I've probably killed all my brain cells. Just been,
It's been. Yeah.
getting used to the world.
To people who don't know, how did it go? How did it go?
It was absolutely nothing like I expected. If you put up an exhibition 2 days before you write, it's worth doing, but it's a really stupid idea. The most stressful thing ever. I was putting stuff up like an hour before the examiners looked round, so I was basically just on adrenaline and stress purely because of that. But it was fine. I thought it lasted for like 3 hours. It lasted an hour and 20 minutes. They sent me to the wrong room, so I was sitting by myself for 10 minutes thinking I was turning it up.
And then they made you wait for an hour.
They made me wait for an hour
Before
in the room above me, so I could hear them all moving around and stuff like that. But it was really more like I thought. It was just like it was a discussion. I was invited to like comment on comments, or someone would say something, and I wasn't really sure if it was a question. And then there'd be a silence, and they'd all look at me, so then I'd just say something. So it wasn't anything like I expected. I thought they'd be asking me direct questions. Why are you doing this? Justify this. And they didn't ask me anything of what I proposed.
I'm so disappointed. You would have liked more of a.
I think I had different expectations. I think my expectations of the Vivers, they would grill me on my things and it would legitimise what I put forward and what I was saying, but because they didn't really talk about any of that, I kind of came out and I was like, well,
Does it practice as research? Research as practice?
yeah. Art practice research. So they asked me a lot about my art practice, and because I had a exhibition, a Viver exhibition, they asked me a lot about what was the status of the exhibition. Was the exhibition explaining the thesis? And even though I wrote a whole chapter saying that's not what was happening, I feel they're just asking me stuff to just kind of strengthen and clarify things and strengthen my position. But it was far less scary than I thought.
Have you got corrections?
I have typos. I have to add more images. I already had about 60 images, and they want me to add more images. You know, I just mentioned artists, and I thought I've already got so many images. I didn't add extra images. They want me to add just pages of images at the end, and I have to take some out. Apparently, I wrote too much in one chapter, so that's fine. I don't have to add anything. I just take some out. So.
That's still well done. Still well done. Let's go.
Well, last week I was interested in reality, in the concept of reality and subjectivity, because until now I have been researching about truth and truthfulness and these kind of things, and probably I was misunderstanding truth as reality. So now I'm more into that. And I was just reading about the quantum physics and the split experiment. That I don't know if you are familiar with it. It's an experiment, double split experiment. It's about it's an experiment that basically say that reality is subjective. It's about throwing one electron through two gaps, and the electron doesn't doesn't do what is expected to do. It works differently. But if you are observing that, the electron works as is expected. So the fact that you are looking at that make the electron works differently. Instead of something material, a wave. So this kind of subjectivity in this specific experiment makes me think about what is real, what's not. And so I'm in that point.
What's Dave have something to say about that, Dave?
I could explain the double slit experiment.
Great, much better than
If
me.
you've got, let's see, right, there's two slits there in the wall. If I fire an electron, it will go through either that one or that one, if you're looking at it. But if you're not looking at it, it'll act as a wave. So then it goes through both at the same time.
Yeah. What does this mean?
If you're looking at it,
If you're observing it.
It's more than that. If you you observe it, but you don't read the data, the electron works like an onda, like a wave as well. So basically, it depends that someone get the information.
It collapses reality into a single state for some reason.
what?
That's weird. That's weird. That means that everything is a virtual, actually, subject.
You have an experiment which someone's doing with like videos where there's like you've got the two slits. That slits and there's a wall at the back and there's a mark where it would be a mark.
Exactly. That's
And then
perfect.
there's, and where it's actually would be like, I'm with you. Sorry, no nuisance to
We've got one
anyone.
person on board.
Yeah, I'm on board.
My favourite one is Bell's theorem. Bell's quantum mechanics. Well, so they measure two photons, I think it's photons, travelling apart from each other. And whatever they measure this one doing, this one's doing at the same time. It's like, if you observe it again, this one's doing the same thing, so it's rotating in a certain direction, this one's rotating in the same direction. Trouble is, they're so far apart that they can't be in touch with each other. Ordinarily, it breaks the speed of light, which is the speed of the universe. You can't break the speed of light thingy. So either we're not understanding it correctly, that somehow they're not two photons, they're joined somehow, or I think that
the
is
speed of light is not the limit.
the speed of light isn't the limit. So the mathematical mathematical physicists, as it were, like Einstein, who believe that God doesn't play dice, reality. So he thinks that things can be understood mathematically, or these other kind of philosophers which you're talking about. We think, well, we don't quite know. These are sure that they're going to be an answer, and these are not sure. It doesn't really matter because they both do their methodology in the same way. Something is X if when Y is done, it Z is the result. But they both have two different camps. Again, it's a bit like the Leibniz thing, knowing which they manage to jump. I'd be stuck on the fence. Oh, I don't know. It's either that or that. I'm not sure. But they kind of leap one way or the other. But that's the other kind of experiment that is in that side. I don't know. I mean, it's just like this.
It's Bell theory, you say.
Pardon? Yeah, it's Bell's theorem. Yeah. It's been proved scientifically, experimentally. Einstein tried to disprove it, but it is now fact that there's
Is it
something.
entanglement?
Yeah, entanglement in particles.
Yeah.
Elise Moulin wrote a sort of very easy access book, but the last two chapters are about what can happen in a what he calls quantum graph, which is not space, where there are more dimensions than one we know. So these photons could actually pass through different channels which we don't see.
It's important because of what Oscar said about he thought that truth was somehow out there. There is a reality. We can then map it.
Yeah.
What you're saying now is that somehow it's like a Kantian, we constitute the subject.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
categorical understanding constitutes the reality. And this is the argument when Johnny's going to start to introduce the object-orientated philosophers who are like currently re-exploring this question after years and years of linguistic analysis. They're coming back to objects and things. So that's where this is. That's where that's going. Do you want to say any more? No? You're cool.
Oh, don't you know?
We'll go with
How am I this week? I'm looking at aesthetics of intelligent systems and how environments are created and how they establish frameworks such as if you consider painting or sculptures as environments and sort of frameworks, you can start to mess about with how its intelligent aesthetics can be altered or messed about with. What else? I'm trying to do an art project, it's not working. So I've done that. What else?
What's the like these intelligent aesthetics?
It's an essay by Jack Byrne, The Aesthetics of Intelligent Systems. It's interesting.
Do you know an artist called Luke Turner? It might be relevant, it might be completely irrelevant. But he did some work on some paintings where he attached his kind of theory to them, proving numbers, and opening them out, and he kind of created this graph, which then created a shape, which then became an object, which then it's pretty bonkers. I didn't get where it was going, but
No, okay,
it sounds like it could be
Yeah, so some of the stuff. So.
What's his name? Luke Turner?
Luke Turner.
Look. Also been reading Kierkegaard because the all good factor. Despair, get rid of your despair by dying, and even then you're still in despair. So yeah, that's fun. Also reading Voltaire, which is
Candide.
Candide. Yeah,
That's anti-Leibniz.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, he takes this is the best possible world, the most possible world, and starts
It's a
to
wonderful book.
rubbish it entirely, which is quite hilarious. And just metaphysics in general, he takes a start. It's great.
Great book.
Alright.
Well, I've progressed. I finished this book now. I haven't finished it, but yeah, I got to the end. That's my progression last week.
What book's that?
It's this one that I've given
It's in,
from the beginning. So, I suppose like I mean, I'm not quite sure whether I'm like how convinced I am sort of the arguments along the way of some of them more than others.
come join me on the fence there, Lauren.
But I suppose the main thing that I think is like what I got more excited about at the beginning was well, I suppose what I'm thinking, she does actually reference the work of May and Ho in the index somewhere in relation to negentropy. So I'm going to look back at what that is, but something to do with entropy, but negentropy. But I suppose like I read May and Ho's The Rainbow of the World and the Physics of Organisms, and in that book she's sort of she's explaining biophysics and chemistry and of the body, but she actually sort of explains it in a sort of more quantum way. So in terms of like brain consciousness as embedded, she actually makes a distinction between the nervous system, so like the connectionist system, which she's sort of rejecting the cognitive connectionism argument of neuroscience on one level. Not really rejecting it, but there's a distinction between that and the way the body communicates really more on a sort of cellular level, more like how bacteria kind of have a sort of intelligence, which so how that functions in a more quantum way.
We should talk about mirror neurons, things like that.
Well, the thing is really it's less. I'm bringing this up because in here she's sort of making an argument against like some of the neuroscience computational sort of, because she wants to make distinct an argument in relation to what she calls soft thought, which is more like this kind of has this capacity. Which is more like how bacteria work, but which she does kind of mention at one point. But then she's also seemed to be arguing that this soft thought capacity in computing isn't to be found in the sort of material world. So this is where I differ, because like with Deleuze's sort of notion of virtual and the actual, the virtual is still sort of real. And so I think this quote brings it home because it refers to a non-sensuous prehension of algorithmic infinities. Well, but in a way it's like this non-sensuous prehension could possibly be the animaterialism that but the animaterialism does relate, I think, to a real matter in a different way. So it's not. So anyway, I think I'll just read this quote. So to break the code of urban programming is to unlock the aesthetic potential of the digital cogito toward the free software of thought, where thousands of prehensions deploy their own feeling for incomputability. It is this lure for indeterminate quantities that soft thought has come to unleash in computation, not the representation of a conceptual prototype, but the non-sensuous prehension of algorithmic infinities. So, I don't know, it's just... So, but prehension is like, she's referring to Whitehead's negative prehensions.
No, to me it sounds like the way they talk about modern advertising, targeting people on a neuronic level, as it were, not cognitively. Advertising doesn't try to engage your attention, they're trying to do something on the body, as it were. Bill Connolly talks about this in one of his, philosopher Bill Connolly talks about this in one of his books, the name of which escapes me at the minute. mirror neurons in this one as well. So,
Hello.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
Hi.
Hello, Dominic.
We just go down the clock.
Introducing yourself?
Yeah, see what people are. Yeah, here's just for Lauren's sake.
For Lauren.
299 in this in the footnotes. It says Rader says that recent discoveries in neuroscience dispute the notion that in Heidegger's words the bounds of the human being run along the surface of his skin. The picture now emerging is one of flexible identity where mirror neurons connect us with others at the pre-conscious level, and body maps quite literally incorporate tools and the space of activity sound in us into our body sense. Neuroscience, Arco, how do you say that?
Jacoboni.
Argues that mirror neurons show a primary intersubjectivity as opposed to the individualistic solipsistic framework that's taken for granted the assumption of a complete separation of self and others. So that's, I think, that's kind of what interests me and that's what you're saying lends me to consider. When you were talking about that kind of sub-level you were talking about.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure whether this matches up or not in terms of distinctions
Yeah.
mentioned, but it's certainly interesting.
But it's interesting. Andrew?
Are you literally going around the clock?
Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny.
That's a done thing, isn't it? See?
Oh, God, who does that?
We skipped the one in the corner.
I have nothing to say.
I've returned to plurality of worlds and the many worlds theory, particularly trying to understand, I'm kind of lost with it, and trying to understand the three types of representation. David Lewis talks about physical, linguistic, and magical or cognitive, and trying to understand how that relates to my work of representation and image and object. And
how's the marble?
it's still not arrived. It's meant to come today or tomorrow. So I've been photocopying photographs of marble this week. So
That's right, it's
Yeah.
very hard.
yeah, so complete opposite to an actual piece of marble.
So it's definitely coming today.
Or tomorrow. It's
What's
like,
next
yeah, they told me 1 of 3 days. It could be here, and I don't know about it. It's very possible.
Very exciting.
Yeah. So then I'll have photocopies of photographs of marble and marble. This theory of representation and lost for a week.
Thank you.
But why are you interested in representation?
Because that's what the image essentially is represent. Well, yeah, the image. Says what? That's a great answer, isn't it? Because an image is representing something, I suppose.
Well, maybe one of the problems that you might be having is that taking as a given representation as the founding feature of an image is going to trip you up, I think.
It's not that it reproduces, maybe reproducing something instead of representation is what I mean. Like, I don't necessarily mean representing a theory or something, but kind of replaces the object. It's the experience.
So you really, it is representation, no?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's that idea of, back to my whole idea of the way we experience sculpture through images. So, like contemporary art now, you look at the pictures of the exhibition rather than going to the exhibition, so the experience is replaced by image. So the image is, so whether I'm thinking if the exhibition documentation is actually the artwork and the exhibition is just set up to create the image. And how
I mean, a photocopy is a reproduction of a representation of an actual thing.
Yeah.
Again, removed from materiality.
Yeah, so it's kind of like so far removed, like, so I'm
So
going
can't your image ever, can't your marble ever be just itself?
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have to be, you wouldn't have to think about a theory of representation.
No, well, I think I've been looking a lot at sculptor studios and photographs of sculptor studios, and just generally the role of the image and how we just are reliant on it. I think I'm just lost somewhere.
I'm giving you a hard
Yesterday,
time.
yeah, but yesterday I was like, I knew exactly what was going on with my life, and this morning I woke up and was like, what's going on?
Wednesday.
Yeah, it's Wednesday. It's all Wednesday and then on Wednesday. So yeah, I'm floating around somewhere, confused with myself. It's a nice place to be.
Actually, I don't know if it's related or not. I don't know where I read that, but it looks like now there are so many images of everywhere. Like, for example, the pyramids of Egypt or something like that. That people has the impression that they were already there, visiting these kind of monuments that are in all the pictures. So this kind of feeling that you don't need to travel there because you already know it. Or these kind of places in states that were so many times in movies.
Yeah.
That if you are there, you feel that you were already there.
And people who go there just take the same photograph as which you kind of see on the postcard, where there's this whole, and I think that kind of relates to me in exhibitions. People don't seem to travel to exhibitions because you can just look at it on the internet.
Yeah.
So like how you look at kind of sculptor studios like Brancusi and Rodin's sort of studios, and the way they kind of hung up velvet cloths kind of behind to take the photograph as if it was somewhere else. And now everyone who has a studio, we've either got a wooden floor or we paint it grey and have a white wall, so we're kind of replicating the gallery. So like this white box has become a studio, and the studio's kind of changed to create this particular type of image, and this particular type of image is for institutional, and that kind of led me to like the Great Exhibition and looking at trees, and maybe we should have trees in our studio. So
Definitely.
So this is where I'm.
There's also there's been some research done. I don't know if you all know who's it by, and it was about memory. And basically, some scientists got photographs and they what's the word, like juxtaposed images of people onto photographs, and subjects looked at them and they thought they were real memories because they looked at photographs of themselves being I don't know, in a particular park or something, and then they talked about, they had a discussion and they triggered it by talking about this a park when they were younger, and they actually thought it was a real memory through looking at the image. So it's not actually a real encounter, but by looking at like you say, a representation of something, it kind of skews, reality or what you perceive in an encounter.
Yeah, it's like that whole thing about when you keep telling a story over and over again, it kind of becomes real. It's kind of a made-up one, and when you think it's your own.
I think there is another example of this. I don't remember the name. Tari, the name of the photographer. She is very famous.
Taryn Simon.
Yes, she did a project about people who were in custody, in prison, because the victims recognized them through pictures. But actually, they were not in the pictures. But the victims were so many times asking for the same. I don't know how to, she explained it very well. The police show the different bunch of pictures every day, but they always choose 2 or 3 persons that repeat in the pictures. So at the end, the victim recognized one of these pictures that were repeated during the days as the murderer or whatever. So this is interesting.
Unless you're the person that is in jail.
So you're between the representation and simulation.
You what, sorry?
You're between the representation and simulation.
Yeah.
Well, there is the work in the Rakugaku called in Japan, and that's this. I think a couple of years ago I brought it to the University of Greenwich, but this is a group of musicians who are in Japan actually, and they are doing simulated voices, and their whole thing was. So they wanted to see if they could do the representation of sound, so that in the same way you do a representation of an image. They did Freddie Mercury singing in Japanese. Of course, he's never sung in Japanese, and he's also dead. Side point. And what was very interesting is that people, when hearing Freddie Mercury's voice in Japanese, really thought there's no reason to think it wasn't Freddie Mercury. And it gets into this whole question of how recordings, any sound recordings, the difference between live sound recordings as live music and the sound of the music, which often sounds better than the live version. And then, of course, at the end of their concerts, they usually do a flat line so that you know that the thing you're listening to is actually a bot. and it's phenomenal. If you go look up either Raku Gaku A, or look up the Formant brothers, Formant brothers. Actually, it's on my EDU page, so you can find it through there as well. But they are phenomenal, and it's called something like an Ode to Freddie Mercury. Is their little band thing, and it is. I always find it just amazing. Though when I showed it, my students are still here. Some of them were not as impressed by this. Okay, but it is still this notion of the representation of the representation, and so we live in a world that's, so recorded that the recording is the only thing that's true. Also, there's a book called The Copy of the Copy by Schwartz, is it? I can't remember. I have it here somewhere. If anybody's interested, I'll pull it up later. And it's called something like The Copy of the Copy by Schwartz or something like that. I'm sure I got the title wrong. And it gets into a whole analysis of how this society is understood, not so much as being visual, but being a copy of itself. So it's a simulacra, which is creepy.
Shall we carry on?
Yeah, go on.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm doing MAP MA full-time. This week I've been knitting a QR code, which I'm hoping is going to, it's going to be a bit difficult actually because my website's just crashed, but it's going to, the code is linked to my website, and the idea is like linking the artwork, embedding the code right into the artwork. I'm doing it with photography as well, so I'm going to I work in liquid emulsion and in digital, so I sort of like analog and digital, and like to overlay them. I'm putting a code into a photograph so that when you look at the photograph, you'll be able to scan and get additional information. And I use double images, so I'm just layering and layering and layering. And Jo saw my work. I had a tutorial with her yesterday, and she said that I was just all over the place, and which is a bit like you were saying, Stuart, that I'm just doing too much and I need to focus on something. And I showed her the video that I showed you, Johnny, of my legs walking, and she said, just do that, concentrate on that, and what you're trying to say in it. And she told me about Francis Alice, who I hadn't encountered before, and so I was looking at his book and I thought I'll use this as a quote actually because it's just exactly where I am at the moment, and he says, walk without ever looking back, walk as far as you can remember, because I'm being stalked at the moment, so all the time when I'm walking I look behind me, and I think that's what this video is about really, is about me walking and not being afraid. And so I did a video this morning actually on the way here at the station, and I feel like I'm kind of getting there with it now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to video map it and put it all over the wall.
Are these the way you say in your pitch you then have the code so you can get additional information out of the paint, out of the picture? How does that work?
Because you scan it with your phone, and then you go to, either you can go to like a Word document, or you can go to a website, you can go to a video, you can overlay it, so you can get, you can actually go to software that gives, when you hold it up, you see a video on top of your work, so there's quite a lot of possibilities.
If it's a QR code, does it scan?
I don't know, I'm halfway through.
Oh, okay.
I've got it actually. Oh no, it's upstairs in the studio.
I'm not sure if you tested it out. If it worked or
No, I've only done like half of
okay.
it. Because I'm linking it to Faroese and Nordic knitting. That's the idea, because it's sort of like two colour, and how Faro knitting, the Nordic knitting influenced the Faroese and vice versa.
Do you know of were you in Birmingham when they had the graffiti knitting?
No.
They knitted the whole town, which was incredible.
Really? What was it
Collaboration did it. Drum, Kalabor. Collaboration. It was called graffiti knitting, or knit to knit or something like that. And they knitted the whole columns in the museum. They knitted, they're like bulls in the bull ring. They knitted a little jump
Oh, I
over
saw
the
the
bull.
jump of the bull. Yeah, yeah.
And it was 400. It was the largest collaborative
Yarn
knitting
bombing, what
moment.
they call it.
Yarn bombing,
Yeah.
is it? You know.
Yeah, there's loads in Bewdley where I live. There's a woman who's
it's just brilliant.
Yeah, there's masses actually in Bewdley where I live. A woman has just yarn bombed everything. Like there's a bicycle outside the museum and loads of trees and things like that. We're just yarn bombed like crazy. Yeah.
What's it, the innocent smoothies have got little knitted hats on at the moment?
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
It's
it's very,
I was confused. That's what the world have gone crazy.
yeah.
I see in knitting and walking continuity. Why should you split that? I mean, knitting is this.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Building this line, especially that work of Alice is not his most interesting to me. I mean, all the videos about his books about towns and the starting of rumors and seeing how things go about and come back if they come back are what is worth looking for this building of lines.
The dripping of paint ones.
The bit of
Yeah,
the pushing
yeah,
of the
yeah,
eyes.
yeah.
all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. No, I think that's what I am interested in actually, is this kind of cyclical nature and going. Actually, what I'm going to do with the code is to scan it and have like songs from Scotland where they used to sit and do the nets together, and so it was like a rhythm. All my work, I'm interested in rhythm, so when I'm walking, I walk to a rhythm. I've been listening to music, so I increase the rhythm according to how fast the music is. So it's almost like a dance, because I trained in dance and film initially.
You know Hamish Fulton's work as well, then?
Yeah, I do.
I don't agree with it.
No, I don't like him.
Hamish Fulton.
Oh, yeah.
Hamish Fulton. No, when I was talking to Jo.
So you
That's
don't have
my-
a strong opinion.
No, well, Jo said she hates him as well. I was like, good, yeah, so do I. Because I nearly went on a walk with him. I put my name down.
No,
And then I thought, no, fuck, I don't want to do it. It sounds really dreadful. We're going to walk around the car park.
You are being filmed.
I think, yeah, I'll quote.
This is over 18. This group.
I think it's because he says, he's got a quote that says, a walk is a piece of art within its own right and doesn't need to be documented, which then means if it really is a piece of work and doesn't need to be documented, what's all his books and exhibitions about?
Yeah.
I
But
think
of course,
he just-
nothing needs to be documented, so that's, you know.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, idiot, that's my opinion.
Idiot.
Hi, I'm Ray. I'm Matt. I'm Sophie. This week I've been making inquiries about the Myers-Briggs personality profiling technique. I was seeing whether BCU does it at the business school, whether I could possibly get in there and be taught how to do the Myers-Briggs.
Can you tell people, a lot of people wouldn't know what that is.
So Myers-Briggs is this way of kind of getting people to do different things. It's a little bit like team building, and it kind of splits people up into different personalities. And I've used it in the past with a group of artists. So I broke it up into two parts where the artists presented themselves and their work and their practices to each other. And then in the afternoon I had someone come in and do this a simplified version of Myers-Briggs called Colours with them, and they then had to view and describe themselves to each other in a different way, and kind of split them up into groups. So it's just this thing that I'm interested in. I use it as a red herring to kind of make them think that it's important to the project. It wasn't important at all, but it was just a nice way for them to kind of talk about themselves in a different way and to view each other in a different way as well. So unfortunately BCU doesn't offer Myers-Briggs as a course, but they said to speak to my course director or tutor forthcoming.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you were going that turn. We will have a little chat.
That's no good thing.
That's great. That's good. We'll talk about, I mean, the whole personality testing. I mean, I don't know how many people applied for jobs recently, but with the minor exception of art jobs, you're often asked to now do a personality test. And it's just shocking. Is that why they can't actually tell who or what you are when you're interviewed, or more importantly, why they can't have difference? It's a way of getting everyone on the force to be exactly the same.
But it's also this thing kind of then people living up to that time that they put into it. I came back to it again because last week my wife was in a team building thing and she showed me her chart. And
Her chart.
Yeah.
It's like-
it's like horoscopes.
Yeah.
And I'd for some reason done an online version a week before, and we were the same personality type, and then we started saying, no, look, we're not really like that, we're a little bit like that. So it's kind of putting people into these boxes, and then they kind of live up to it. So it's a farce, as far as I'm concerned, but it's a nice distraction, a nice red herring.
Is it linked? Do you think in your research it would be linked to horoscopes? Like if you know the great horrible chat up line. If anybody chats you up in a bar, and asks you what your star sign is, you know
What's your age
immediately.
or what's your star sign?
Yeah.
Run.
Gender as well is always irritating. Just want to mention. Yeah, no, but it's interesting these kind of blocks that one is then put into. Is that where your research is going?
Well, it came
Answer
from,
this very carefully.
I know. It came from that thing about kind of trying to understand contemporaneity and kind of getting people to kind of remake each other's work. So it was this way of breaking up a group of people into groups that you can then kind of match up opposites to remake each other's work. And Andrew came to one or two of the
Okay, now we see where the problem is done. Yeah,
well, he didn't take part. But there was
It's not my fault.
No,
I don't believe that.
there was
It was your fault yesterday.
Yeah. Sorry, I was encouraging students to think
Laugh.
outside of the,
To be
enjoy
noisy.
themselves and be critical. Heaven forbid.
It was wrong. I had to go out and tell them to stop.
Sorry. I'm not that sorry.
No.
It's just something I play with. Because I'm MA, I'm allowed to play with things.
Yeah.
No. No, you're not.
I was just going to say quickly as well, it's, has anybody heard of the schools that are based in Theosophy, or Theosophical schools, where they actually put children into categories depending on the way that they look? So if you're tall and thin and pale, you'd be put in a specific category, and you're taught in a specific way, and they promote dance actually as a specific way of learning, and that they believe that they need a very kind of passive manner of the way that the children need to learn, and everything's based around arts and creativity. I went to a talk at pub by a guy who was kind of writing on it, but yeah, they're crazy schools.
It's a bit like Steiner, isn't it?
Well,
It's a little
it's
bit.
a Steiner school.
Oh, it is a Steiner
But it's
school.
based. Its history was in Theosophy, which goes back to Madame Blavatsky.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is why I was interested.
Ectoplasm.
No, Steiner schools are a bit scary because I went to look at them when my daughter was young, because I was thinking, oh, I'll go alternative education, and I was like, fuck, they only let them use, sorry, that's so swear. They only let them use pastels, only pastel colours up to the age of like 10. It's like the primary colours excite them too much, and I was like, yeah, so good. That's good, surely, that's good to get some excitement. But it's quite scary. Yeah.
Wow.
Weird.
But then in terms of my own work, I've been looking at the hidden mothers photographs this week that Daniel had mentioned once, and basically in the Victorian era there was.
Wait, you don't mean him as being Daniel?
No, sorry, Daniel.
You
You were there when Daniel mentioned them.
That's right. Oh, I see. This is the Daniel corner.
Sorry. And there was a kind of movement in portrait photography in the 19th century, where obviously families would want pictures of their young children, and in order to get them to sit still, they would hide their mothers underneath carpets or behind curtains, but it was really obvious that there were figures underneath this. But the reason why I was looking at them is because the series of photographs that I've been making, which are based on the supernatural scarf, that ectoplasm took the form of a supernatural scarf covering the head of the medium. I've been doing this series, and it just struck me that the way that they've turned out, they really look like these kind of hidden mother photographs. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but obviously it kind of plays into the idea of vanishing women, and I was kind of playing around with the sizing and spacing of the Davenport Brothers boxes, which were the magical vanishing boxes for the kind of vanishing female trick that they used to do kind of on stage. So yeah, that's.
But the very first sentence, which was, you were looking at the way in which the vanishing mother thing worked. But what was this? What was the point of vanishing mother? I mean, why was it so seeming normal to stick a mother underneath the carpet?
No idea where it
It
is.
was to keep
The
children
child.
quiet.
Yeah.
Could the child see
Had
the
to sit,
parent?
it's Victorian
There was
photographs.
sound.
There's actually a mother sitting underneath the carpet.
Yeah,
Yes,
should I
there's
show
a,
you?
there's a
They're
Victorian.
What? That's ridiculous.
Like, what happened to the poor mother? She had to stay there under this carpet the whole time.
Yeah.
It's because the cameras had a long exposure time. You have to keep the children quiet and still. So you put the mother next to them so they keep
Yeah.
them quiet. Because they won't
So
be
that little lump
fidgety.
that's behind the child when you're
Yeah.
she's 18,
That's
it's the
weird.
mother.
Yeah.
But they do a similar thing now. But they,
It's just like creepy. Can't they just pretend that it's the mother and put like clothes or
Don't
something?
they pose their children?
Yeah, if
in
you,
photographs
Yeah,
as well?
if you
yeah.
look at the hidden mother, then you'll start seeing the dead children.
yeah,
as
that's
well.
really.
What? Do you see the dead children?
They used
Yeah,
to
they used to
pose-
paint
Where's
their
this
eyes
going?
on-
The Victorian way of death is very unusual. They would quite literally pose the living with the dead, and you find like living children in bed with their dead brothers or sisters, and then we'd have the portraits taken like that.
And they used to prop them up, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they were
It's,
completely
it is very, very
Very
creepy.
creepy.
The Victorian way of death is very.
Under the carpet.
Wow.
Oh, that's
It's not, she's
weird.
not even laying down.
Yeah, imagine me
Find the
laying down.
mother.
That's so weird.
That is fantastic. We have to make that into a
You got one
poster.
of the lines there.
Yeah.
Wow. How?
I can't remember what they're called.
And you're connecting the hidden mother scenario with
It
ectoplasm.
just struck me that the kind of look of the photographs that I've been creating, where it's, I mean, I use myself in the photographs, and then it's kind of wrapped my head in a scarf, any kind of form of scarf, and the backdrop is like heavy curtains, and it's a really kind of patterned carpet, because it was based on the descriptions of like the seance rooms that they used to kind of take part in. And it just, when I was looking through them, I was thinking they just have this real they're just very similar in the way that they look to these images, and then it played into obviously the woman being hidden in this, and then I was playing around with the idea of the vanishing box or the magic trick, kind of the sizings of where the female would obviously vanish within these. So I'm making some kind of link.
That's fantastic.
There was a British artist who died in '92, rather young, Ellen Holmesworth, possible, who made a series of pieces, a group of work where she printed on wooden structures that were a pyramid, the shape of a boat, the shape of a crib, the shape of a small tent. She printed in black and white the images of what these things were. So on the tent, it was the image of a tent. But she was always interacting with these objects. With the tent, she's inside and she's right over, so you see her hands in the guitar. And then there's another one that looks like a piano, vertical piano that she's playing. And so there is, firstly, there is this first layer of the body appearing or disappearing into this object. But then she's done, and that actually links to your work, another layer of.
Who's the your?
Andrews.
All right. There's
Another
three
layer.
yours in the corner.
Well, she
Daniel.
took photographs of herself moving these objects in front of a white curtain, as if it were a theater stage curtain that draws and closes it. And she is moving the objects apparently towards going across the curtain, behind the curtain. You never see her in front, she's naked, she's moving them, but you never see the figure of her face. But you see these objects and the curtain becomes, like in old Baines painting, the most important part of the work, because it conceals something. And this image that you just brought up of the vanishing mother somehow visually brings it up as an immediate link.
But it just strikes me, especially from what Andrew was just saying about looking for representations everywhere. This is kind of like the anti-representation approach. You know, a lot of times people are trying to look for, you know, until very recently, those kind of net curtains that were in windows were always analyzed as like skirts and like these kind of like, you know, the women's little hems of or the way in which they were like tablecloths that were representing something. But to try and not represent the mother. And then in such a bizarre way, where she's actually just sort of, I thought really it'd be laying down and she's just sort of in the background somewhere, or that you see their hand on there or something like that. To have this kind of ghost that you know, where's mommy? It's like it just seems very.
And these are the post-mortem photographs that Mark just mentioned. So this person is dead, and then they used to.
Which person's dead?
The person, this guy.
The guy standing is dead.
Yeah, they used to. Sorry,
You can just see the stand
memento mori
actually.
photograph. So they used to use a contraption like this in order to prop the body and then
Did you want
photograph
a portrait of somebody?
They used to
that had been
think-
propped up when they're dead.
But
They
they did
used
all
to
that
think
children,
children,
didn't they?
in
It's
Victorian
the
era, it
children
used to be
one.
very-
If you see the ones of the
Yeah,
children,
there's loads
Yeah.
of the children.
So it's a very different sense of death, though, too. And I mean, I think that that's also one of the things that, not that I'm saying that we should all now start propping people up, but I do think that it's just a different way
Yeah.
in. That is so shocking to us, I mean, in this environment, because death is so removed, that it would it would be considered, not normal, well, obviously it's considered normal, but it was considered something that you would do. Like, certainly, I was in, certainly in cultures these days, not so much in England, but in North America, where people were dying a lot from the HIV stuff, and you'd have the body laid out, and people would be sleeping with this person, or, you know,
There's
like,
that one in Brussels that's come out, was in the paper this morning, that a woman in Brussels has been sleeping next to her dead husband for a year.
yeah.
Catholic tradition, you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
the family in the an open casket in the house for at
Yeah.
least a week before you have a funeral, with
Yeah.
the family just eating, carrying on as normal.
Yeah,
But I think also when you said in societies where people die a lot, because the Victorian children, loads of them would die, most
yeah,
of them would.
50%.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is like we have to remember this child because they've only
It's
got to
it's
this
a kind
age.
of
it's
preserved
sort of-
image of the
Yeah.
person, and sometimes it's because they have no pictures of this man.
No,
No,
In the
they
whole-
have
Yeah.
nothing.
So
yeah.
we need one picture before
Yeah.
we bury him,
Yeah.
you know, and it's
Yeah,
like
it's like,
this kind of
yeah, my son took a picture
Yeah, but
of
why
his dead
to put
hamster
the
because
man
he didn't have
standing
one.
and just take the picture?
Maybe the photographer just tried to be creative.
It's
All the rest of them.
It's also the fact that money. You take one picture only in the great
Yeah.
event, and that's that.
Looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah, that is amazing.
That's a good point.
On the plus side, this is not the death mask.
okay.
You know, they've sort of taken some care to make the person look
There
normal.
was a painted death of, there is a crypt in Palermo where they use to dry and stuff monks and then children, and they still have all the crypts with these painted mummies.
Yeah, they use wax to paint their faces. I was reading it was a tradition with nuns, and if they were supposedly virgins, they believed that if they
What
covered
do you
their
mean they're
bodies.
supposedly brothers?
Sorry. They believed that because they were pure, in a sense, that in death, that if they preserved themselves in wax and were seated in lifelike positions, that obviously when God came back to earth, or Jesus came in another form, that they would be reunited with their spirit and they would get up and walk and be as they were. So there's in Rome, there's lots of it's in Phantasmagoria, Marina Warner's book. She went around and visited all these kind of seated nuns that are in positions of repose, and they're kind of, she describes them, which is quite awful, as having features like monkeys, because obviously the blood kind of dries in the fingernails, so they kind of wrinkled and black, but their faces are beautifully preserved with wax and kind of painted and took lifelike. So.
Yeah, weird.
Follow that, Kate.
Sorry, yeah. What are you doing, Kate?
Well, I've been thinking about people sitting under blankets myself, and trying to theorise it. And I think it's very interesting because you don't have an image, and yet you have a presence. And the blanket indexes the human being, so the human form is gone, but the presence is still there. And I think this typifies the Lacanian real.
I knew we'd get back to that.
Because it's like a pure presence. It's not. There's no representation at all. The blanket kind of points to the person underneath, but you can't see it. And it's like you can't.
But why would that be pure?
A pure presence. It's not a representation in any way.
No,
It's
but
not,
it is.
It's not an iconic representation of a human. It's not figurative.
But it is. If
Yeah, surely there's one.
in fact, it's exactly that, because it's presenting the a notion of a generic.
It doesn't resemble.
But
The blanket doesn't resemble the person, except vaguely by shape. But it's not an image of a person.
can you tell it's a person?
No, I must confess I've been making photographs like this where you take the picture and then you run away and hide.
What?
Yeah.
Anybody else doing this?
It doesn't. You look like a rock. It looks like a rock standing in the middle of the picture.
But surely there's like at least a head was
No,
it's
no,
rare
no,
to
you
sort
can't
of-
see. No, you
So you like holding it,
hold it out. Yeah. and
but
it
then
just
surely
looks-
there's like, it's got to be figurative.
Well,
you
I
can't
don't know. I
escape
don't
it.
know. I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna sit on the fence as to like.
Okay. Oh yeah, surely there's
But I
some
don't
kind
understand
of
why that would
figurative.
be, sorry, I don't understand
Well,
why,
it'd be,
that would be, why does that draw one? I
because
know I
it's
tease
a
you about
metonymy, it's metonymy and not a metaphor.
but I hate to keep pressing this point, but the thing is that if you have something that is, like yesterday we had a MA presentation on this very interesting artist's work, and one of the things that she's done is she has like kind of, I don't know, drawings over, so in fact it's not even over something, it just looks as though it's over something. And it looks, because of the way it's positioned, it looks like it could be over like a, say, a pregnant body, not just, you know, any body, any kind of body. And also like the Little Prince, you know, that famous story, or the dancer Xavier Leroux, all of his work with all these kind of blankets and, you know, images as though there's something underneath there, and sometimes there is and sometimes there's not. Doesn't mean that because you can't literally see the point-for-point representation, that it's not in fact igniting a notion of a body.
Have you looked into Rebecca Ettinger's work?
No.
She is a painter and also sorry, I'm looking at you. I can't read these things. Sorry, it's just Stony. She's a painter and also psychoanalyst.
Yeah.
And she developed the matrixial, which builds on Lacan's real on the object A. So what you're talking about, the
Yeah.
pure sense of,
Yeah, I think it was the
subjectivity,
object A.
which in psychoanalysis is the object
Yeah.
A. And she develops through her own art practice, through photography, and through a process of abstraction, the image, which was once there, becomes distorted through layering. And she argues that the real has an intersubjective relation through this process of abstraction. So we can no longer see the image of what was the photograph, but they emerge as, she calls them phantasmic figuralities, which is obviously a psychoanalytical thing as well.
Plasmic.
But she has a theory based on that element of the real, and has a whole theory about different aesthetics, the intersection of how it fits in.
But that isn't the Lacanian real. Is
She
it?
builds on, she draws on.
It's a lack.
She basically, really,
For the person,
in a
it's a
contemporary
lack of
sense, not many people draw on that, but it's
Mm.
something that's just been left, and she is taking it, and she argues that's what can be, I suppose, reinvested in aesthetics. But I mean, I just might be worth looking into, and looking into her art, because she's an art practitioner, looking into her artworks. But I've never come across another artist who looks at the real before, in a non-representational sense.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
Well, in a non-representational sense, I've come across many artists that look at the real. It's just that I you know, for example, the Rakugaku people are just.
no,
thinking-
I mean, what I mean is, because she's also a psychoanalyst.
Oh, right. You
She
mean
develops like a psychoanalytical
Lacanian
theory.
version of the real.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're,
okay.
if you're specifically interested in that, she develops an actual psychoanalytical practice, and then that's intersected with aesthetics. It's not art practice based on that. It's an actual, like, legitimate theory of psychoanalysis. So.
Okay.
Interesting. Would that be interesting for you as well?
Possibly. Kind of worms. It's kind of worms to be going there, but.
Interesting.
Rebecca Ettinger, B-R-A-C-H-N.
Why'd you say it out loud so everybody can hear you?
Rebecca, B-R-A-C-H-A, Ettinger, E-T-T-I-N-G-E-R. She has a
Rebecca
book
Ettinger.
here, but I think it's made in Kenrick, I think.
Good.
Hi. I'm a
Are you still
painter.
sick?
I used to be sick. I don't really know what to say. I was thinking about being a painter is, you produce 2D images, so you're looking for balance, I guess, in the final image you want to show. So I was thinking what this balance is, and I thought it was something like the result of struggle. So balance, when you find a balance, is always the result of a struggle, at least in my paintings. So this is very generic, but that's what I'm thinking about.
There's a big discussion we had yesterday, again, in this seminar that we were at. A number of us were here were at it, which the question is, like Jacqueline, did you tell everybody that you PhD? Good, she's a doctor. So the doctor over here, the new doctor in the house, made an argument, which you all know because I sent an email on anyway, saying that there was a écriture féminine, which was a way of thinking about painting, painting, writing. Then there was a thing yesterday about drawing, that the drawing is in fact the primary feature of being, really. Now, what would you say as a painter? Would you say that painting could be kind of like in Jacqueline's argument, or do which you could see things depending? This could be a painting, a painting could be a bit like the normal forms of the usual forms of painting, or do you think that there's a relationship between drawing and painting, where painting is totally different than drawing, or drawing is totally different than painting, or they're the same thing?
I think maybe painting is part of drawing.
So drawing
maybe.
is bigger, as it were, than painting. Is it bigger generic than painting?
I'm thinking that maybe even sculpture can be drawing, can be seen as a
You
drawing.
did perfect yesterday, and that's what they're arguing. Yeah.
I mean, even you can make a painting and use collage as well on it. Just use glue and stick things on it. But at the end, it's always a 2D image, which reminds you of a drawing more than the shapes and the lines more than the colors. But still, the colors have to create some kind of relation between each others, so you can create a drawing, I guess.
What do you mean by 2D? That's as in it goes on a wall.
Yeah.
Because see, I kind of struggle with photography being 2D because it's flat, like the paper's flat. But I wouldn't class painting as 2D because,
Pointing to the painting that no one can see.
Our favourite painting in the world.
Also, not many paintings take the form of canvas on a
These
stretcher
days.
either these days.
Yeah, but even if we just limit it just to the stretcher on the wall, like it's surface isn't flat. You can see the paint and the brush and all these sort of things. I wouldn't class it as a 2D.
Well, when you do it, though, you are working on a canvas or on a wall. So when you do it, you
actually
actually.
Isn't that just a specific part of painting, not painting as a whole? I think I've got no answer to it. I think I'm just being a bit.
I think what you're saying is a formal interpretation, and that formally it appears two-dimensional, but you could perceive drawing or painting conceptually as spatialised in how its internal components set apart like photography.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about Genesis, the Bible, Genesis, the first book, and it says, in the beginning there was the Word. Do you think really it should have said in the beginning there was painting, or in the beginning there was drawing, rather than the Word? Because the argument is, if you say in the beginning there was the Word, it immediately sets you into the sort of the roadmap of language, and then we are into the Lacanian real. So, in the beginning there was the Word. But if you say that you start with in the beginning there was the mark, or in the beginning there was the, gesture or something like this.
The mark is it?
The mark.
I think it's a good one.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well,
Because as another painter in the
I think it's as well. I don't know.
It's what? Yes.
I think it's really complex, and like from my point of view, when I was trying to draw a distinction among drawing and painting, I think to me it was about the aptitude you might have. Like, of course, drawing might be better related also to sculpture or architecture, these kind of things for sure. But if we're talking about just something that will eventually be part of a 2D flat surface, I think that you can easily paint like with a pencil, and you can draw with a brush. I think it's just if you try to make a discourse to explain, probably, I think you are going towards drawing. Like it's like a logos thing. Try to explain, to make a point, to make a line, to go from A to B, C, D, rather than if you want to give if you don't want to unfold and you want to keep it mysterious somehow, no matter your tools, you are painting, I think.
That's interesting.
You can create a mix as well. I mean, drawing and painting, can be the same thing in one, but still two different things. But
that's why I can't really say that this is drawing, this is painting. Like I think it's a perspective thing, like the perspective of the author and the perspective of the people that are actually
audience,
the viewer. So.
But there is also another element to it, and drawing has been traditionally invested with more essential character or mode of operating, because the modern, from Renaissance till the end of the 19th century, really put drawing chronologically before painting. First you draw, first you do the studies, then you draw the painting, and then you put the color in. So much that then when the contemporary arts, to use big categories, sets in, is that you have the work on color that looks at light and not at the essence of the figure that is on the canvas. And you have the impressionists that start looking at the perception rather than the mental image that is in the figure. So there is the ambivalence that you bring up, which I totally agree is there when one works, has been structured historically in very, very specific ways.
And watercolor, before the Impressionist, because the watercolor is really the technique that forces you to start with, rather than marks, really with stains and fields of color. So it's really the technique where you really struggle to give a sense of a 3D structure like an object, but would be very easy to give a sense of just an atmosphere and therefore landscape, these things. The other way around, if you try to paint with tempera, the way painters were doing 7 or 8 centuries ago, you will eventually turn everything into something that is touchable. Like even a landscape will look like an aggregate of things rather than
because it's textured, because it's layered.
Because the way you
actually
act is
by lines.
By lines.
Yeah.
You can't really work otherwise. Like even if you are trained like a watercolor master, if you actually work with tempera, you will do ugly blurs if you try to force that technique into something different. And the result will always be a tangle of lines.
So why do you see that as, I mean, I want you to, I think I could guess why you see this, so it's kind of a rhetorical question, but you mentioned the word attitude. Would you say that the word attitude is similar, different, or something else altogether from the word attunement?
Sorry?
Attunement, like in Kierkegaard's, well, in being like sensitive to something that's happening. I mean, when you say attitude, how are you using that word, attitude?
Attitude meaning like what's your aim?
So intention.
Your intention, therefore the way you behave. And so and also your technique, because
to me that is what you're meaning then.
Yeah.
So the attitude is the technique.
It's
because your own opinion isn't what you're putting in there.
If we take the person, the ideal person knows how to express anything with the proper technique, then we would say that the attitude is the tool. But sometimes, and I would say all the times, people are most trained and able, and they will just ended up using that thing that they know how to use, and then they will find out they are struggling because their tool is not the most adequate to the result. And then therefore happens that if you start painting or if you start doing something else, like therefore you think that your poetics was meant to go there, but probably it's your tool that draw you there. So I think attitude and possibility, technical possibility is almost just the same of your ability just to imagine.
And do you think that's true, Francesco? Does it work like that for you in your work?
I
The
don't know.
relationship of attitude?
It's just, I don't know, it made me thinking a lot when we talked about being at presence.
Yeah.
And you said being at presence is like this, and you didn't say anything, and there was just the noise of the room or whatever it was. And I think this is a good explanation of making art. So
we have two different uses
there's so
of the
many
word
words
attitude
to
there.
explain this though.
Well, you can point at something, and that is the most basic and perfect way to be an artist, to show the moon, this kind of things.
You mean to point at it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And therefore your finger is invisible because the point is the moon. And that is one way.
Literally, the pointing of the moon, the point is,
Yeah, and also like tokonoma, Japanese things, like you put a stone into the frame, and therefore you have your piece of art that is perfect, beautiful. You can fool yourself with that for half an hour or a day or a week. Then you can change the piece of holiness with some bark or some other stones, and therefore you have your personal perfect museum forever. And this is a way of doing. And I don't know why I'm trying to do the other way. Just trying to create something out from something else, rather than to point out how extremely being there is something that is already there. But I think there's two different, I mean, it's always art, but really two different approaches.
See, there's the last thing I did is I found 2 mirrors in the streets, and I brought them back home and I painted on them, and I started writing things, and there was a face as well. So the nice thing it was that wherever you put these 2 mirrors, the painting was going to be something else. It was going to change all the time. So yeah, I'm just thinking about this as well.
Can I haven't said anything yet. So what I've been reading about this week is Kenneth Clark book on the landscapes, and so he's talking about the landscape of fact and the landscape of symbol and the landscape of fantasy. But I think the opening line in the book is, this is a misquote, it's something like what you were saying about balance. And so it says something like, to unify, bring together the elements in the picture, what is required is love. And that's the first sentence, and that jumps out at you. That's a strange thing to say, and then you start to read the rest of the book. And he starts talking about how landscape doesn't really appear until about 15th century, about 14 something, with Hubert van Dyck, I think it is. And it's a very tiny little picture, but it seems so late in the history of painting. Before this, as well as symbolic art, everything. The landscape is symbolic. And then you get to this, and then he starts talking about how the difficulty of getting the sky, because they were quite happy with, because nothing moved in the landscape, that was great, but then the sky presented the problem of light within the picture. And I've got really nothing to say on this, other than it's kind of resonating what the pair of you two are saying, and now I want to rush back and read the rest of my book on the landscape.
I'm not sure if it's translated in English, but there's Gianni Carchia work.
How do you spell that?
Carchia, C-A-R-C-H-I-A.
How do you spell it?
C-A-R-C-H-I-A.
Yeah, and he wrote a book that I can just tell you the title that is about beauty. I will find out if it's translated in English, because it's a great book, and it talks also about how the concept of landscape, it's really a modern invention, and he, do you know this book? Well, you have a chance to read.
That's right. There's 3 Italians in the room.
But yeah, I can't say anything really meaningful now about him because I'm not prepared. But really, what you said was resonating again. This book,
the way landscape takes off through Berlin and Vienna, which is not a place that has a landscape, but then takes on the mantle of moving the landscape art. It's fascinating stuff. I'll be really interested.
But this whole discussion now has evolved into, I mean, this is why I think it's so lovely to hear what you guys are doing, because it sets a good scenario of how we move into the rest of the work. But it just seems to me this whole question now, about which Andrew started, well, I came in, so that's when I said we're starting it, but, you know, maybe I'll talk about representation. But the way in which representation ends up, just like so many concepts, ends up taking on the fashions of its time. And when you think that the landscape, the notion of landscape, or the actuality of landscape doesn't really appear until, what, you were saying the 15th century?
Yeah, 15, about 14, something, mid-14th, 15th century, somewhere like that.
To me, that's very interesting as a question
And they're very small.
of
very
identity. And, you know, again, this question of representation. You know, for so long there was always a debate between allegory and, you know, whether or not a painting was allegorical, or whether it was mystical, or whether it was having a mythical thing, or you know, what was the story with it, you know, what was it representational. Now you don't even hear the word allegorical. It's very rare to hear a painting discussed in these terms. And I find that fascinating, the kind of fashions of this. And so I was giving you a hard time, as I must do that, you know. But about the notion of the, you know, the pure real, or the notion of pure, because I always have an allergic reaction to anything that's pure. I mean, that's probably my thing, so that's one of the reasons I get annoyed with Lacan. But but having said that, it seems to me that if we get away from what has become the talisman of modern and postmodern discussions, which is on this notion of representation, or likewise on this notion of identity, and we actually start peeling it back a little bit more and look at these things, these brush strokes, the relation between stain, which I think is interesting, and mark, also fascinating. The way in which, you know, I've gone into mathematics, and I've sort of dragged a lot of you into it with me, but you could equal, you know, in terms of points and lines and waves and dimensions, but it sounds to me that you could, especially after what Mark's saying with this book, that you could equally go into sort of a parallel world where you're thinking through the way in which things that are, I'm going to use that R word again, represented, but I don't mean the classical sense we mean it now. I mean like how images take their shape on a canvas, and they aren't standing in for anything. Because as I was saying before, like when you would look at a painting in some time periods, there were all these deep meanings. You know, the skull, the bird. You know, these all quote represented something. But in our time period now, everything represents something. You know, it's a, you know, the whole thing is a representation. So it's a kind of interesting peel back of what, you know, to try and get a sense of what does this balance mean? How is it that love comes into the picture? You know, what does it mean to talk about an attitude? I think these are questions that we need to start really taking much more seriously, or I need to take much more seriously. Maybe you guys have already been doing it. But yeah, I just wanted to add that.
The thing is that any line can have a meaning, you know, especially in a painting. So you can tell a story from a painting, and yeah, it's very hard.
Can any line can equally so? Is it also true that it cannot have a story?
Yeah.
So a line is it possible that once you put a line in that it doesn't have a story? That it is.
But you can see as well. It's kind of like.
So the question becomes, how does it take on its storiness?
The thing is that you can describe something with so many in so many different ways that sometimes it's hard to understand what it really is about, or maybe it's all the things together in one.
It's a bit like Francis Alice. We were talking about praxis last night, and he says in Paradox of Praxis, he says sometimes making nothing leads to something, and then he does the opposite as well.
Who's this?
Francis Alice.
Oh yeah, right.
And so it's that paradox, I think, as well, that you can produce something and make nothing, or you can it makes a negation, or you can do the other way around as well. And it's the same with the sublime.
It's also double articulation, because it's not just the artist making work, but it's also the experience of the viewer as well.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's a whole other thing to think about when you're not engaged with the making of something, or not invested in it, and just encountering something that's material or has line in it, and it's not representational in a conventional way. That's
Now the idea of the primitive painter who said a gap in the rock, and he imagined I don't know, a deer or something, and then with few more lines, everyone was able to see the deer. This idea of use as well, the things that you have You have the gap in the cave and the vision of the deer, and then help everyone else to see this deer. I think this is the well, like key point of being an artist, like see something and be able to show to everyone else.
Like I was saying to Andre earlier, it's this movement out of the curly. Oh, I understand it. I understand it. Thinking about this movement out of the curly guardian aesthetic into the ethical, and that grey area between the two. If the curly guardian aesthetic is a kind of inner space or a private space, much more aesthetic, and the universal belongs to the ethical, then there must be a grey area between the two, which is interesting to me. Looking at other people's work, like Jo, who you mentioned earlier, her work, I'm thinking about, and how, and what I maybe do or don't do, it's this how things move from this private world into more universal, revealing, concealing kind of.
The other question too is just to keep in mind, and we'll move in, is I always wonder, why is it that the question of the audience that you're bringing up comes into play when we're talking about something that would be called an image or a movie or something like that, but it doesn't normally come into play when you're talking about reading, even though it's, maybe you have this thing called the reader, or you have this thing called the the consumer who buys the book or something like that, but you don't really have this thing called the audience. And what is it about the writing that develops a different kind of relationship to the encounter, or it suggests a different relationship to the encounter than the looking at an image suggests? I think that
I think it's because you're doing it by yourself. You're just buying a book.
But you're viewing by yourself. I mean, you could have a ton of people.
Yeah, but it's partly this is to do with the poetic.
Yes, I was wondering if I was going to have to hear from the new doctor.
Well, language has a different universal sense than what's visual. A mark on a canvas isn't universally, even a hieroglyph or Arabic, if you're not familiar with that language, has no universal sense of meaning. But language, formed together in sentences with syntax, grammar, morphemes, lexemes, if you want to go into linguistics, whatever, it has, to an extent, a universal communicative function. So even if you're reading by yourself and you encounter it by yourself, it has a sense of universal sense. But when things start to get into a poetic logic, when it doesn't follow such a conventional form of interpretation, then that's when the interpretation, the viewer becomes important, because then it's not universal. If each of us looked at a poem, we would interpret it in a completely different way. And I would argue that's in painting or certain types of artwork, that is that sort of interpretation, because we all look at a photograph, we don't interpret it in the exact same way, because there's no syntax or grammar that encourages to read something in a specific
well,
way.
sometimes you can find these kind of things.
I mean, I'm not talking this as a concrete, just in general.
In general, it's true.
But it's also the case that there can be a zillion readings of, for example, Hegel, or
But does that mean the writing's more aware of an audience because it's written in sentences and full stops, and actually, if I was ignoring the audience, my writing could make no sense whatsoever.
And obviously we don't read the same thing. We all read Dickens, we visualise different things, but it has more of a sense.
What about what I was saying is, aesthetic and the religious. In Kierkegaard, he has these three stages: aesthetic. What about an art? And then he doesn't take art through the ethical and into the religious. But what if you have this kind of religiosity in art? What is that going to look like? It's got to be something that transgresses the ethical, equivalent to Abraham and Isaac. So you're talking about. I mean, I'm thinking of how it moves up. How the artwork sort of passes through or goes beyond the acceptable, the universal, and what kind of things happen now, in relation to your own work, maybe, because there's always this kind of there is quite often, when you move into that grey area, this kind of little voice saying, "Oh, I'm going to put that on the table yet." No, we're not going to put this. Like, that's my story with the door. I was prepared to put it on the table the other week, but hadn't been the week before, kind of thing. So there's this kind of movement through these different layers, and I'm sort of interested in these grey areas of
That's where grey areas are interesting because they don't have to be graspable, they can
Yeah.
exist in grey areas, and that's
Yeah.
the beauty of a visual compared to the difference perhaps between
But
texture.
I believe that when you look at it in this terms, we fall into the image text projects of itself, of being certain, of
I mean, the text being certain. the
Yes.
image, yeah, being.
the text or language presents itself as I am the communication tool which is transparent and means what it says or says what it means. Which is absolutely not true. Even laws are interpreted constantly. And then if there is doubt, then you refer to the spirit of the law, which actually is a contradiction of the very point that language is. Images or sounds or whatever are, to me at least, are as precise as text is, and at the same time as open as text is. I mean, beside all the postmodern death of the old or of the hermeneutics that came out of the other line from Heidegger, the very fact that text presents itself as the precise tool, and the rest is vague and superfluous. For some this afternoon, this is the real thing, business. It's not true. It's a position of authority that it has taken.
But doesn't
Do
that
you think?
sorry,
Do you think it could be because when we are very child, we were very focused to learn how to write and how to.
It's the paradigm of our
and we are
culture.
not well educated in images from the beginning.
Yeah, it comes down.
No, but no, wait, I have to say, you cannot take that as an argument.
No, I
No,
guess
no, you can't, just as a, not you, but as students, please don't take a general position and then take it as true, and then from that point forward, make your argument. You will be hung out to dry in a viva, okay, or in anything. You can't take a generality. Do you think it's true that, the public sees it this way? You could say yes, you could say no, but you can't prove, you can't, not you, it's not an attack on you, it's just to say, you have to be, one has to be very careful when you present a generality as a truth function, and then from that make an argument, because it will just unwrap, because at the end of the day, it's just taking as a given what you're trying to prove, and then just doing it at a more sophisticated level. So be very careful about that. I'm not trying to, show you up or do anything like that, but just to say it's a trap to think like that. So you can't go around and say, well, did you think this way as a child? Did you think this way? And everybody goes, yes, we all thought this way as a child. Therefore, it must be true. Therefore, we're going to go to point B. No, point B is what you're trying to say. So let's think about how to make that argument. Now, what really is your argument? What are you really trying to say?
Well,
don't worry about whether
I think
that's true.
I think it's probably because we are not so forced to learn how to images work in symbols when we are young.
But I mean, and a whole different argument could be that the only way one communicates is through symbols. That writing, for example,
is symbols.
Yeah,
Well, there's another argument through Kant where you can say he's got the I think with that perception, which draws sensory input together, but it's quite passive. It's passive, I think, draws geometrical to the intuition. Then it's spontaneous, but then there's another kind of spontaneous alongside that, which is the spontaneity of concepts, which are my concepts. So one, you have a kind of passivity, open to the world, as it were. On the other side, you have this kind of concept formation representation. And I think within, you were saying, one being an authority, of course, maybe as individuals, you would want to stand on the world as an individual, and this is my representation, and that's why the language takes the route that it does, what you were saying. But that's simply because the I think part of it, the part that deals with the intuitions and the geometry and the colour and all the rest of it, just doesn't have that language and doesn't want that language because it has to remain open. And if you made it more active in its understanding, or whatever, that's the wrong word for it, but in the way it goes about its business, again, that's the wrong way of saying it, it wouldn't function in the same way. It would become part of the looking via a will or a consciousness that takes a will that takes a consciousness rather than a consciousness that takes a will, if I can put it like that, which is kind of Kant.
Okay, do you mind if we move into Braver? I think that's,
Can I say just one thing?
quickly.
Now.
Because I had this thought, I hadn't had the time to say that. We were talking about the difference among reading and the fruition of images.
Yes.
Might be something that everybody knows, but just to make sure. I didn't know that there's a difference among ideograms in Chinese and Japanese. Like, since I was here in Europe, I thought that all the ideograms were nice because they were just the Zen kind of Japanese ideogram. But then I've been like a tourist in Beijing, and I found in the museum lots of very ugly ideograms hang and frame, and actually was because those poets who paint those ideograms, who paint those poetry of the, they were interpreting the meaning. So they were full of themselves in a very, very romantic way. And for this reason, they weren't caring about getting rid of their personality and just do the nicest drawing, ideogram. But they were actually trying to give all the sense. So a little bit of that ideogram was meaning something, also because like our own words, their words are really, like the ideograms are a patchwork of other ideograms. So if that bit of the ideogram has less ink or is a bit trembling, maybe it's got a completely different meaning or interpretation of the whole picture of the ideogram. So I think that this might be a bit erratic, but could be interesting.
That's a very interesting point. I mean, how many people maybe there are people in this room who would like to take up this question of the ideogram and how that operates as a kind of hinge between the writing and the picture. It's a very interesting problem.
To me, that Chinese ideogram were really something that I couldn't tell if they were closer to my idea of writing or my idea of painting, because they were really the middle point. And I was very, very jealous because I didn't have the key, and I will never have. Because I mean, you need to devote a good part of your life if you're not burning that culture.
So I think that's for you, Dana. Yeah. Okay. Can we do? Let's just open Braver for a second. I was curious when you were going around the room that we may have forgotten about the question of what is a thing as opposed to what is an object. And I think that particularly given the fact that one needs to think in terms of these words that have been brought up now a couple of times, dimension. What is first dimension? What is second dimension? What is third dimension? What is fourth dimension? In fact, what is meant by dimension, actually? When is time a dimension, and when is it a zero dimension? When is it the fourth dimension, so on and so forth. So in chapter 2, they get into this, Braver gets into this thing on the thing, dusting. And we did have a discussion about it a couple of weeks ago with Stewart's, little, whatever that thing is called. What is a thing?
Yeah.
Your book.
Emily
Brown. Oh, and that just reminds me on, sorry, I meant to announce this when I came in at 2, but at 1, and I obviously didn't make it 1. The books, PDF books, I put on both journals of the thesis, and I've also put on what is a photograph. So for those of you that are very poor or just want to get a sense of what the volumes 1 and volume 2 of the thesis looks like, and or the photograph book, it's on Dropbox. So it's in the thing.
I tried to download the volume 2 of the thesis, but the camera was broken. I
really?
The file, I downloaded the file, I could open it, but when I opened it, just say it was broken. It couldn't be repaired. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Were you able to open it?
Well, I never downloaded it from Dropbox.
Okay, so nobody else has tried to open it? Okay, so then I'll redo it. It might have a timeline on it. Right? Self-destruct. I was wondering about this because it's sent by, you send it or whatever that thing is, and it has a date when it's supposed to go up, so I'll redo it. Okay. Right, so maybe we don't need to literally go into chapter 2, but I think that I'm curious as to what one understands at this point in the seminar by this question called the object. Even including what Kate was saying in terms of the notion of lack, or the notion of the pure, or the question of difference. How do you understand the objective? The object is very different than the objective, but let's start with the object. How do you understand the object? And then when we go to, because we're meant to be doing the last section. God, this thing. It's just going to Matthias's 9R for some reason. Okay, so I don't know why. This obviously has mine of its own. Who would like to begin? At least, Dane, why don't you make a comment, if you know, of how you understand first, second, third, fourth, fifth dimensions? Do you have a sense of that? What's third dimension?
Third dimension is X, Y, Z, it's space, there's the width, depth.
Okay, so in fact when Francesca was saying that a painting is two-dimension, you would have thought to yourself, no, actually it's three-dimensional.
In a classical, mathematical definition, yes, it would be sort of three-dimensional. You can't really have a two-dimensional.
So there's a painting here, there's a photograph here. Is that one dimension, two dimension, three dimension, four? I feel like we're doing a hopscotch now. That's right. Hot potato or whatever it is.
Three. Yeah.
Three. It's three dimension. But then you were saying that you found a photograph being two dimension.
I was talking about surface, which was maybe.
But that's important. Okay, so when is that three dimension, which is right? Okay, so we know it's three dimension right now. But when is it two dimension?
I don't know, because I'd argue that a piece of paper makes it three dimension.
So is there ever a time that the photograph?
When it's light, but then it's not anything.
So is two-dimensional imaging when it's just on the digital, when it's just done through digital?
On the screen.
On the screen. Would that be two-dimensional?
If you project it, then it takes on another dimension altogether.
So this is a very simple question, actually, and you are PhD students, and you need to know which is the first dimension, the second dimension, the third dimension. So we're all at least on the same playing field when we use these terms. Andre, what do you think? Pick on you as the MA student who could just play.
I know. And then taking a punt as I can. Is it third dimension because it kind of exists through time as well? It's time is one of the three dimensions in the third, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Everyone was very confident earlier today. So what's first dimension? Okay, forget about first dimension.
Times, is it? Having a guess here. Time, space, and distance.
Another MA student gets to guess. That's true. We're PhD people. Whoa. First dimension. Let's go again with third dimension. So is this table third dimension? Right. Is the surface of this table third dimension? Okay, and what do we mean by surface here?
That which is, I guess,
on top,
attached to the object, but not a part of the object per se. It's in a relation with it, I guess.
Okay, that we're getting warmer. Grace?
No, I haven't.
No, it isn't. Where's my ectoplasm when I need it?
So coming out of the book here, Wittgenstein's going to say that you know what these things are until you start to look at them, and then they start to entangle, and you become confused.
See, this is a postdoc speaking. Knows how to get a good move.
When he talks about the glasses, is a good example like that.
Yeah.
You don't see them, you see through them, and then when you start to think about it and see them, then that's when it becomes confusing.
Okay, I want to know what is third. What is third? So we know that this table. We can say this table is third. Forget about what Graeber says there, but just let's see if we can get. I can turn the camera off if you like. We can do this privately. What's three dimensions?
Well, if it's a mathematical equation, then
I'm not asking for math. I'm just saying everybody used first, second, third very likely today. I just want to make sure we all know what we're talking about. So what is the first? What's the third dimension? Because that seems to be the most. Lauren?
Well, mathematical volume is 3D.
Are you asking it or are you saying this?
I thought, like.
Are you making a statement or are you making a question?
Like,
yes. Is it? Which
well,
is
I
it?
don't, if we're to do sort of maths, that's like.
Now don't take it to another position. Just what is 3D, Andrew?
Like a cube.
I'd say 2D's flat and 3D's something.
Deep.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting there.
Yeah.
Boy. Okay, so flat. Okay, this
It's
is
got
something-
3 dimensions, hasn't it?
Anybody who has, children who are like 7 or 8, your kids are a little bit older than that, right?
I've got an 8-year-old.
Okay, well then you should be doing homework with him. He will be telling you.
He's a mathematical genius. He teaches me, actually.
Okay, well tell him to explain to you dimensions. and
Yeah,
it's kind of-
he's good at it.
it's
One
very fun.
dimension's the one that's I'm lost on.
Everyone's lost on all of them, as it turns out.
But I mean, like really lost. So I only remember
As opposed
2D,
to vaguely
3D.
lost.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that.
Any 3D thing is like superpositional thing, which so
It's it has a position, right?
It's
So
superpositional.
what is superposition?
Well, so you can't
It's
confine
4D,
it to like
right?
these 1, 2, and 3D.
And you can't keep explaining things. You're going to end up in Oscar's situation where you can't keep explaining something in relation to something else, or you'll never get to explaining it. Okay, it's like X. That's true.
It has a
but what
spatial
is it?
dimension.
Okay, so 3D has a spatial dimension. What does that mean?
It's an object. It's
No. We're describing an object, so we can't use object in the definition. Yeah?
Space. I think of it, maybe it's too simplistic, but 1 dimension is a line,
Yeah.
2D is a surface, and 3D includes depth, so it's a space we can move about. Move in.
Okay.
So it's volume.
Okay, let's try it again. Say it again.
So we've got line, surface, and volume.
Okay, so 1D is line. And how come 1D is a line and not a dot?
The dot is a dimension because it is infinitesimal.
Okay, great. Great, okay.
It's
You
a
gotta buy him a beer. So go on, say it again.
So the dot is infinitesimal, the point in
Yeah.
geometry. The line is the first, is 1 dimension only. The surface is 2-dimensional. And then volume is 3-dimensional.
Okay, and what's 4-dimensional?
The time is the one.
Okay.
It goes through it or sees the stage moving along.
And what's 5 dimensions?
It goes beyond Euclidean things. Then I can make a pipe.
Then you're gonna make up. No one knows you're talking about, it's fine.
But surely the viewpoint's always from multi-dimensional anyway, because there's a lot of kind of stage setting for a line to be in 1 dimension. You have to abstract the business, the capacity to be able to see for a start, which is in volume. Draw your line and explain it from the drawing. It's an abstraction.
So we're almost there.
We don't need. I don't think you need the time to be necessarily coming as the 4th one.
Okay.
It can come as first if you like. Like the dot can change color. And
So what do you understand then by dimension? By saying that, what do you understand by dimension being first dimension?
I'm just saying that we said that the dot doesn't have a dimension because it's
Infinitesimal.
But if we can see 1 dot, or imagine 1 dot,
It's a crushed up line, let's say.
we can imagine that dot changing color, and that will be a visualization of time.
We wouldn't have
But it's
color.
already surface. It's not
Okay, so
Exactly. Because a dot, in geometrical terms, according to Euclid, a
Yeah,
dot
that's
doesn't
it.
have a body.
Oh yeah.
So
But
it cannot have a color or change color. It's called abstract.
can you tell them we're having a seminar?
Do we? Okay.
Yeah, let's go on.
We have a seminar, sorry.
That wasn't even a hello.
Yeah, I'm rolling 5 by tokens.
Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so now, so first dimension, you're not wrong there.
But surely if there's a line can't just exist by itself. If a line exists on its surface, then it's the surface. And
So
then
then
if
a
a
two-dimensional.
two-dimensional plane is perspectival or
Which is
optical
maybe why Andrew
vision.
has issues with first dimension.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if a two-dimensional plane has visuality or perspectival depth, then that can become, surely that's not limited to a two-dimensional surface.
Okay, anybody else want to go? Give it a go?
No, I'm okay. I agree with this.
With Mattia.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is the only explanation, but this 1 to 3
We just have to-
dimensions.
we
Now
just have
with
to
this line,
agree
it's now 2D because it's on a,
Yeah.
sure, it's on a, it's not, it doesn't exist like
I'm confused
there.
of like the physical, what 2D, how 2D exists physically, and where 2D actually, because actually
Maybe
nobody
And
sees
this
on
is
there is
3D.
another
Yeah.
element that
So-
should be added to these. When we're
Reading
speaking,
about it now. Go on.
when we are speaking about these 3 dimensions in geometry, we are speaking about an absolute description, an absolute text that is not this. This is a representation of that. So
Wait, these are,
this not this material reality we are in. We're talking about an abstract layer that is above and beyond this reality. Is just thought. Therefore, a line is an infinite number of points accumulating in the same direction. And it doesn't have a body. Otherwise, obviously, one enters the paradox of needing to say that this is bidimensional already.
so is a concept that you're just thinking about, you haven't written it down, you're not looking at it, it's in your quote head, as it were, does that have a dimension to it?
Would that be one-dimensional?
Not answer. No. I'm asking. Let's just park it in your head somewhere. Just let it cover. Let's at least agree on what 3-dimension is. 3-dimension is
line, surface, and volume.
Okay, but we don't know what a line is yet. So we know that a surface is 2-dimension, and we know that volume creates depth, and therefore, and when we say depth, we mean actual depth, not depth that you could see on a painting, because that could still be a surface, right? So you can't walk in the painting unless you're doing your thing that you were walking in. Okay, that's different. Those different whole. Then you're getting into quasicles and whatnot, and you haven't even raised that yet. Okay, so this notion that 3D means that a human body in this world with this gravity can go into an environment, and that's called an object. Is that correct? Would we all agree that that's what we mean by object in the most basic 8-year-old version? So this is Euclidean geometry. This is a very basic notion of object. We're okay with this notion of object. No, it is a trap you're walking into. Okay, I just want to mention that to you. Just okay.
No, I've never been happy with any of this.
I know that. I know, it's very distressing.
From this high, I've never been happy.
I know, it's upsetting. And you're right to be upset about it because
They've never explained it.
okay, no, okay, so, but we're more or less kind of agreed as 8-year-old. We're all going to be 8 at the moment, and as an 8-year-old, minus Mark, who's still annoyed. I can imagine you, just smaller.
Angry.
Angry.
Yeah, my son's like that. He did tessellation the other day, and he was telling me how to tessellate.
He did what?
He learned to tessellate.
What is that?
It's. Please tell.
It's a repetition of a pattern, so
Is that they all fit into each other?
yeah,
Is that how
exactly.
they, it's
Tiling,
yeah, tiles on all
geometry.
repeat and they're all the surfaces of it.
Yeah, and it all
That's-
touches
yeah, I know
together.
that. 'cause
And
I
he described it
rejected any sense of maths.
perfectly, just like Tony. He taught me how to tessellate, and I was like,
I
wow.
thought you said he tested light. I thought you...
No, tessellate.
Okay, let's all stay on the same game here. Okay, so you're 8 years old. You now know that the object is called an object because in Euclidean geometry it has volume and depth, which is more or less the same thing. And therefore, it takes up a thing called space. And that's what we mean by 3D. And that then is like a cat in a hat. Because the next problem is, what do we mean by space that it's taking up? What do we mean by volume? And what do we mean by the fact that it's sort of there, wherever there is? Okay, so that's the first thing. But at least we are on the same moment for 3D, okay? Can we move, now we know that 2D, we're just move backward for a second. 2D, then from the 3D as our starting point, 2D is the surface of 3D. So don't think of 2D, don't think of it, it first starts with 1D and then it goes to 2D and then it goes to, rather it starts with 3D and we go in different directions. Okay, so that's the first.
That helps.
Does it help? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
that we started. Yeah.
Didn't you introduce yourself to us first being 8 years old and then?
8 or 80.
Yeah, you say, so we're just bringing you back to 8.
Yeah. We just stay here for a while.
That's right, just stay in your 8-year-old moment.
Yeah.
So try and remember when you're 8, you're getting it. So you start with 3D, and now we're going to move back one, as it were. We're going to go to 2D, and we're just going to do the surface of the object, that's 2D. So we know that anything that can exist, first of all, we until the computer age, until photography really, this thing of existing in this really flat 2D way was just a concept. Because even painting could exist as an object by which we understand 3D. Layers, canvas. You couldn't go inside of it, but nobody was trying to go inside of it in the same way that the painting, I guess you could say a painting created technology that allowed for 2D to be present.
Who was the Van Eyck that invented the machine for perspective?
Yeah, I think it was Jeff.
Frame,
yeah.
And then the grid of wires.
I think that was Duras.
Duras, sorry.
Yeah. Was it Duras?
Duras.
All right, okay. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so you have this notion. Let's put it like this. The first way that the concept of technology starts to play into this starts to deal with this notion of 2D. So painting starts to be rethought, not as 3D, because there wasn't even a question about 3D, or 2D, but it starts to be understood now as a way to make this thing that is a surface of the real, because now the word object as 3D is also equal to the word called real. But now we find that in 2D, which is the surface of the real, the 2D can now be entered into in holograms. Okay? So now we have a weird form of 3D. We have a 3D that is in fact 2D, but one can be in this 2D.
Is that like the little picture of Jesus that winks at you?
Well, I don't know. That's unbelievable, Kate. I don't know. Is it like the
holographic universe?
There's flat. Because if they have depth, but they don't.
Are you talking about the holographic universe? No.
No, you're talking about particle
talking
force.
about?
I know what you mean.
I have no idea.
I know, it's a postcard.
Yeah.
And it looks completely flat, but it looks as if it has depth.
That's lenticular.
Yeah.
When I was 8,
Oh,
I
I
was
see.
obsessed with those.
Yeah.
Because
8 again.
Yeah.
It's a very
I've got one upstairs. It's an Edward Mugbridge. Mugbridge, how do you say his name? And it's athlete jumping up and down. I got it in Milan from the design studio because you see both. You see both images. They jump up and down.
So film then starts becoming this odd form of 2D. This jumping or Jesus winking or whatever it is. That's fantastic. So you have 2D, which takes on the garments of 3D. So far, so good?
Can we have 2D without 3D?
What?
Can we have 2D without 3D?
Can we have, who's a physicist in the room here? Stuart?
No, I said last week I failed O-level.
So that's perfect, so did
I look at
Einstein.
marks. Schools, yeah.
Einstein
no,
failed
no,
at O-levels as well.
Right, well no, I'm still not. I'm not even going to try to put myself in.
Breathe, it's okay, I didn't mean to call you.
I think Dane is.
I would have thought you would. Yeah, it's not
Yeah, okay, Dan.
I'd be happy with just a yes or no answer.
That's right. You're in this class,
question.
right? You do realize that you're in this class.
Yeah.
You're at the table now, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you have 2D without 3D?
Can you have 2D without 3D?
So can you have surface without object, I suppose, as well?
Not sure if you can have surface without objects. So tricky.
I did mention Einstein because that's key.
I think if you're talking about representation, you cannot, but yes, in a physical way, yes, you can have 2 dimensions without 3 dimensions.
You can build
What is
3D
it? How does
objects
it
into
exist?
dimensions.
I'm gonna weep!
How does it exist then if it's not? This is my problem with 2D because what about the edge and stuff like?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
that's
just
just
a
a
whole.
whole.
I'm kind
I
of
mean, I always keep
thinking-
my mouth shut, but that the edge and frame and all that.
Yeah,
We
because
don't have
that's
it.
already 3D. Yeah, that.
Well, that is 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that
But if you
is
have
3D.
something, if you're talking in photography terms and you've got light, and so if you're projecting through the negative onto the paper before anything's ever happened. It's just existing in the
Space.
light form.
If it's
Yeah.
film, can just surely
But-
just be 2D.
Yeah, because when it doesn't
Oh,
exist
don't
anything physical. It's projecting onto something physical, but it's not actually physical itself.
Okay.
I had experience of 2D, I think.
It wasn't Jesus winking at you.
It wasn't Jesus, I think. It was in a museum, a flat,
A long time ago.
a
maybe.
flat wall,
Yes.
yellow, could be any color though. But because the wall was so wide and there was just not enough space to look at it farther away, I just could see just yellow everywhere.
So like Rothko's rooms where it's kind
Yeah,
of
so that was
Yeah.
a 2D experience to me. Like I have no clues about how far it was from me. There was no way. I
just
could have
did
told, I could have seen my feet, but otherwise, if I was looking in front, could be 100 meters, 5 centimeters. There's no clue. So that was a 2D experience.
Okay, we're getting warm-ish. Okay. Anybody else want to give it a go?
I'm not sure if this is on the what you were saying is made me think of when you look at a light and then turn away and you get that.
That
I don't know what it's
halo
called.
or whatever.
Yeah. You look at the light and you look away and you still see the lines. Whether that's
I don't know. I think it's different. I'm just saying that in that case, I couldn't see the edges. Of course, I could see my feet if I really wanted, but just normally looking in front of myself, it was just the infinite yellow. And so that was my life. I was in a 3D world, or 4D, I don't know. But I was looking at something that to me appeared 2D.
Well, 2D, okay, so let's try it again. So 3D, we know what 3D is, right? 3D has a volume, a space, it's what we normally understand as an object. The Euclidean sense of object, forget about the Heideggerian sense of the object. Then we've now stepped sideways to 2D, because that's the surface of the object. And the surface of the object, as you know, is a surface, not because it's on top, but because it is the expression of the object. It's the let's say the most outward-facing expression of the object. And if you sliced off that particular surface and threw it somewhere, that thing you sliced off would no longer be the surface. It wouldn't be a discarded surface somewhere. You'd still have a surface on the object. And you could keep cutting the object and throwing off whatever that thing was, and the object would still have a surface. So the surface is attached to the object, but is not the object. So that's the first key to 2D. The next key to it, and this is where Einstein comes into play, since he rejects the notion of the frame, and you need to reject the notion of the frame and edge and representation, all these things in order to get into quantum physics. One of the things he argues in probably special relativity, but wherever he puts the E equals MC squared, what he realizes is that the equal sign, as I was saying before, creates the attraction, or let's say symbolizes the attraction of, in this case, energy, matter, plus velocity squared. And that attraction is a 2D expression. So this thing called energy equals mc squared, the whole notion of energy, is 2D precisely because it's a surface that has no structure. And it's the first time, that's why quantum physics is so wildly bizarre, and why Mark was right to talk about at the age of 4. Mark is actually the secret physicist in the room, that he realized that you don't need edges, or if you have edges, that's a very specific political, aesthetic position that's being taken. And that Einstein also realized this. And so once you get rid of the edge, you get rid of 3D. Once you get rid of the edge as a marker of how to go forward, you're getting rid of 3D as the only game in town. And just saying, so the surface, a 2D is a surface, but the surface is real. Up until Einstein, the surface wasn't real like that. If it was a real surface, it stuck to it was still 3D. It was only when there was the move to think, wait, hold on a second, what if we just, when you slice off the surface and throw it somewhere, it's the structure you're getting rid of, and you're actually interested in the surface. So that's the 2D. Mattia.
There's a question. We're saying 2D as in surface, but is surface here used metaphorically in a certain way? Because I'm thinking Einstein.
Well, it'd be helpful to say an object without structure.
Yes, or a set of dimensions which.
We can't use the word dimension in describing the dimension.
Okay, then it can be a set of relations.
Yes.
Which, no matter how many play together, constitute a surface, which is a dimensionality, which is a one dimension ever. It is multiple inside, but it is.
Well, it's not one dimensional; it's two dimensional.
No, it's not one dimension. But this is what the question was, because if we refer to relativity, would there not be several elements at play and not just two?
There are several.
Therefore, there is.
No, all that one needs to, at least until you do some more reading on this, you need to get a sense of how this attraction creates a surface. How the 0 and 1 creates a surface, and how that can be inhabited.
Yeah, no, that I understand.
And not in a 2D, and not in a 3D way.
I believe I understand. But in a certain way, isn't the equal sign not just between two items, but open in all directions? So it's in between, or better, it holds together a number of different things.
Well, in fact, it's a bad word. I mean, the equal sign is, it's kind of a shame that we can't come up with a better symbol. Okay, everybody, come up with a better symbol than the equal sign, because it really doesn't have endpoints. You know, it is true that it says endpoint E, middle section equals C plus M, whatever it is, squared. But that makes it appear in our minds as an endpoint is an E, the other thing is the other part of this equation, and you have this thing. No, it's all together.
Yeah,
and that all together thing is 2D. It doesn't have endpoints. It only has endpoints because that's a way of describing it, so you can get your head around it. Sort of.
Precisely because it doesn't have endpoints, I would think it is one.
No, it's naming. Which is the difference between representation and naming, is what we're getting at here. That equation isn't representing the thing, it is the thing. So it's not standing in for the thing, it is an algorithm. So an algorithm, I don't want to, I just want you to forget about that word, forget where I was going with that. The point is that 3D is a structure that has a surface to it, and if you take away the surface from the 3D object, then the 3D object still has another surface. You could keep doing that until the thing went to nothing and you just ruin your object. But the surface, so a lot of these thinkers, Heidegger included, was thinking of surface as a discourse that was built by getting rid of the ground. The ground was the object that it was getting rid of. So a groundless ground meant that you started with this ground, i.e. the object, and you got rid of this, and you could talk about the kind of thing that was not left over, but the thing now that could stand without the structure underneath it. And that the discussion then moves between 2D and 4D in Heidegger and in Wittgenstein, which is where we're always going to have to get into a longer discussion about this next week, because I don't think you're ready yet to discuss these things. Anyway, so just to think 2D, think of surface that is able to exist without being attached to the object. And that up until very recently, that was not understood as anything other than fanciful. I like that, that was an interesting idea. And the example you gave, Alberto, about standing in a moment where you feel, that's still 3D. It's just that you feel, you're experiencing it in a 2D scenario, but in fact, you're actually in 3D. One of the things I think is so thrilling for me was when we used to drive in Canada in these whiteouts, and you couldn't see a thing. And it's just amazing. And then I realized how insane I obviously am, because you're in a car driving 60 miles an hour, a whiteout. But the other day, I ended up in a fog, and it was kind of the same thing. It was so fabulous. You're just enveloped in this thing. And that gives you the feeling that you're in a 2D environment, but you're still very 3D, sadly. You know, and you could easily run into another car, you know, or something, you know. So the 2D thing, only recently, by which I mean, in terms of, I think photography was kind of the forerunner of this, but really computing, and now this notion of the holographic scenario allows one to think about it. And so you have, and like I said, a lot of artificial intelligence and morphogenesis is based on this. Now the 4D, let's go in the other direction, the 4D, it is about time giving meaning to the object. So when something is understood, when a 3D moment is articulated, including the fourth dimension, it immediately brings in the issue of time. So history can be understood as fourth dimension. And in fact, I was just listening to this program today on BBC that around time travel, which is one of my favorite all-time subjects. And they definitely were putting forward the case of being able to time travel. You can definitely time travel the future. And of course, we already have stars time traveling. So you know you're looking at a lot of stars that are already dead.
I recently proved that time travel's
viable. No, going backward in time is impossible.
Okay.
But I don't understand that argument because, you know, I don't understand why that's impossible, but going forward is not impossible, because then how do you get back? Because you don't, maybe you just die.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not sure, I don't understand why, I don't understand the arrow of time argument yet. That's out of my league at the moment. But, so fourth dimension has to do with time, but depending, like Jacqueline brought up the question, because you could have time in different scenarios. So in fact, in some things you'll read, it has to do with vibration. So in other words, fourth dimension, if you're able to exist in fourth dimension, you can pretty much go through, in fact, the thing is that you can go through walls, because the vibrating sound comes into fourth dimension. And so sound kind of operates between 2D and 4D, and sort of skips the 3D, which is also interesting about the sound problem. Now, we still haven't figured out the relationship between das Ding, the object as in what we've been looking at, and what I was hoping we could do today, but it was a crazy day anyway, but I think it was quite productive going around the room again, and I appreciate you taking the class. But that maybe, as it's now 4 o'clock, is it possible that, Dane, that you and maybe Andrew can think about 2D and have a little discussion about it for next week?
I might not be here next week.
Uh-huh.
Just
Clever. Okay.
I want to be there.
Okay, and now, and who would like to try a stab at 1D? Okay, Sophie, that's good. And then,
I don't know if I can make it next week.
what's happening with next week? What's wrong with next week?
It's
Oh yeah, you might not be able to make
children,
it
it's really
next week.
difficult.
No, you might not be able to make it.
Oh no, next week I'm in a lockdown situation.
You're in a lockdown,
Yeah,
yeah.
I am all day.
Yeah, so that's probably not gonna be good for you.
No.
Would you like to try one?
Here either.
You're not here either. Or should we have our seminar next week? Is it gonna, I'm gonna be here.
I'll be
You're gonna be here. Let's have a
doing my
discussion.
presentation by
Yes,
myself.
that's right.
To myself by myself.
I can take that superposition.
Okay, you can, and
Briefly.
you can talk about superposition, and can you talk about in terms of how you position the superposition?
I'd like to show my image of the superposition.
Okay, good.
There's some time travel as well.
Okay, so I want the two of you to talk to each other. Would you like to do, he's listening. No, I don't. Would you like to do either 2D or 1D? Would you like to do 1D?
Shorter, yes.
Do 1D. Not shorter. Okay, anybody else want to be involved with any of this? These Ds? Okay, that's about it. Okay, so we will then have these presentations.
He's actually covering his ears.
Yeah.
And then we will finish the last chapter of this book again. We'll do it, we'll try it again. I'd also like to say that unlike, it was brought to my attention that Grace was being so wonderful. She was very polite saying, I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to make your lecture tonight. And I was like, what lecture? So it turns out that I'm not having inaugural lecture tonight. Okay, so please don't go to it because it doesn't exist. That was a mess up in the calendar. I thought it was going to be on the 11th of, first I thought it was going to be next week, then the 11th of December, then the 4th of, anyway, it seems at the moment it's the 19th of February. Okay, so you'll know. The next thing is that there is the launch, which is on the 28th. Please come to that. My brother Frank Golding, who is head of YouTube in New York, he's going to be here next week. He's visiting me. So you'll get to meet him and ply him with questions and drink, which is more or less in that other order.
Stay not to be.
You're not here. That's a Thursday.
Oh, Thursday, oh brilliant.
Yeah, no, but he'll be here on the Wednesday. He'll be here at the PhD on the Wednesday. You know Frank.
Frank,
Yeah. That's it. And I do apologize. I was in a very annoying long meeting, and I think that the rep. And nobody asked me what I was doing. You know, what is my research on? My research is on how to never take on admin roles when you get into a position of being a professor. If you can possibly figure it out how not to do it, it'd be brilliant on your part.
I think if it was away, all of us would be doing it.
I mean, honestly, it's really shocking. However, the good news is that I did finish the one thing. It was 4 pages long. It took 6 months to write, and I finished it. And then we had a long discussion about it, and they said, yes, but we can't prove that last bit. It's not quite finished. Anyway, but it's almost done. It's almost done. So thanks for bearing with me, because it's been a really quite complex last couple of months having all these meetings. That's it. And Zatesis number 2 is going to be out next week. It's really a wonderful, wonderful journal. And at number 3, the call-out for it is going to happen. It's going to be on basically on acoustics, thinking about acoustics, acoustic visualities. And one of the guys, in fact, I wanted him to come today to talk to you. This guy named, in fact, where's Jakob?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, as you are. Okay, well, this guy named Ed McKeon, M-C-K-E-O-N, is running a project called Dialogues. And he's bringing in some really amazing thinkers and musicians, mainly, in March and April. And we're going to have a lot of their work involved, and I'll tell you all their names and everything. He couldn't make it today, but he'll come next week to give you the whole lowdown so you know what's going on. Next week, see, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
Maybe you won't miss it. Maybe you can come.
No, I've got to take a bit of 30 years. I'm daydreaming.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, I promise them.
Oh, okay.
I don't look at art, which for me, students who study don't look at art.
Yeah, a little bit nuts.
Giving my own time to sort them out.
Okay, good. All right, thanks. Thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate that.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mark.
And congratulations to you. Yay!